On today's show, we react to locker cleanup day. We heard from the players, we heard from the coach. What stood out to us? We discussed that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti, the birthday boy. Happy birthday, buddy. How's your day been so far?
Day's been good so far. You know, got freshened up today. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna enjoy a nice day of with pizza with Nonna.
Oh, very nice.
A little emotional eating after the Leafs. Did the thing that they usually do.
There's been a lot of emotional eating for the Maple Leafs over the course of the last few days, I'm sure. Okay. So locker cleanout was yesterday, Dave, and it's always an interesting kind of day for media to have a chance to speak one last time to the team. Usually they're a little bit more forthcoming, talk about what they were dealing with injury wise, what they're thinking about going into next season. They've had a couple of days to kind of decompress and think about what happened in game 7, where everything wasn't super duper fresh at that moment. So you might be able to get some better answers. And then, we get to also speak to the coach and find out, his thoughts on what went wrong with the group here in game 5 and game 7. And if he feels as though this team should or deserve another opportunity. I guess, Dave, we'll start there. Does this team deserve another opportunity? Because I've done a couple of hits now on radio shows and on the Locked On NHL show. Ross asked me the same question today. Talked about how much success the team had in the regular season, won a division in Craig Bruba's first year here for the first time since 1999, right? They had home ice advantage. They won a round. They took the Stanley Cup champions to 7 games. And you heard from a lot of the players and coaches that they felt as though, they see me without saying the words that they were close and that they have belief that they could get it done, right? Willie was asked if he wanted to run it back, and he basically said yes, and Matthews basically said the same thing. Tavares said he wants to come back. Mitch, we'll talk about Mitch, obviously, in a little bit. He was the only one who, was not as he basically didn't say anything definitively, but we expected that. But do you, Dave, think that there's any way possible that this team could run it back?
Exactly as it's constructed, no. I think there are going to be changes made just because there are elements of this team that are lacking, that are missing. And the only way that's going to change is if they free up some cap space and be able to kind of do things a little differently. And I think if you try to bring everybody that's currently there back, you won't be able to make those changes you probably need to make.
Yeah. I tend to agree. But it's more so just because I think that change is needed. Change can be good. Are you going to replace Marner specifically with another Mitch Marner? No, you're not. But maybe you can get some different element in the room. It's not going to be a 100-point guy, but it might be someone who gets you 70 points, but is feisty as hell and gives you that energy in a game 5, 6, 7, right? Like a Sam Bennett, that can really elevate in those postseason games when needed. So that's kind of where I'm at. And it feels as though, based on my takeaways from locker cleanout day, my biggest takeaways, it feels as though Mitch Marner has one foot out the door and maybe even both feet out the door. He was speaking in past tense a lot when talking about his time in Toronto and how much he loved it. He loved being here. It didn't feel as though he was speaking like a man who expected to return next season.
Yeah, it's not only that, but when he came out and says that he needs a couple weeks to speak with, he hadn't talked with his wife. I'm like, what do you guys talk about?
Wow.
You kind of think that this is something. I understand he just had a kid and all that stuff, so
Yeah.
they're probably weighing a lot of things, but like, he's had a whole year to think about this. Like, if he needs a couple more weeks to think about it, something tells me that he's trying to maybe convince himself on a scenario that he probably already knows it's kind of cemented of where he wants to do. Like to me, he was gone the moment he didn't fully say at the beginning of training camp that he wants to be back, right? Where he didn't definitively say, you know what, I would love the chance to try to come back if we can make a deal work. Didn't say that at the beginning. So in my mind, last year or when training camp began, his foot was halfway out the door there. Now his realization, like you saw how that game ended, right? Head down, knowing that kind of this is probably it for him. And then him constantly speaking the past tense and him kind of reflecting a lot about his time in Toronto would lead me to believe that I think he understands that for him it's a done deal.
I think he's probably 2 feet out the door. He's turned. He hasn't quite locked the door yet, but the door's, shut. He's out, but it hasn't been locked. And I think that's where, in the next couple of weeks, we'll find out if he's locked the door or not. I thought I had to sneeze there for a second. All right, I think we're good. I think we fought through it. In terms of what else you heard, maybe it's from Mitch Marner since we're on the conversation.
Yeah.
Any other takeaways about Marner before we kind of move on to the rest?
Marner didn't really he talked about how it sucks and things like that. But he talked about his family a lot, about like the spotlight and stuff. Like, he didn't make it seem like it was hard on him, but it was hard on his family.
I wonder, based off that too, if he doesn't want his kid to grow up in that environment. Right?
I could see it. And
like I could, if he and his family were getting berated, like he had mentioned, and his parents, getting berated, like he may want to go to a better climate, both weather-wise, but also, sports fandom-wise, where he won't be scrutinized as much, or not even him, where his family won't be scrutinized as much. I could see that really becoming a factor here in his decision making when he wants to decide, do I want to be here for the next 8 years? Like, do I want my son to be around this and have to hear about this and have, him be at school and he's 4 or 5 years old? If something goes bad, the kid's parents telling their kid, oh, tell, what was his name again? Marner's son?
But Miles.
Tell Miles that his dad, stinks or something like that, and he's got to hear that at school. Like, that's where, he's a father now and has to kind of think about those things, and that's just one element of it, right? But I think it's a more significant element that 2-3 years ago wouldn't have necessarily been part of the picture that now is, and I wonder how much of it of that is going through his mind. But again, like, it's a conundrum for the Leafs. There's no doubt about it. Like, it's very difficult to move on from a 100-point Selke candidate and expect to get better. It is very difficult, and getting nothing in return for it. It is kind of hard to wrap your head around it. Like, I know fan bases around the league are kind of mind blown that the Leafs fan base is so quick to just move on from a guy like that, because there's 31 other teams that probably would love to have Mitch Marner on their team. But sadly, with just the way that this team is constructed, you already have, Auston and Willie locked up. You might be able to bring back Tavares on a team-friendly deal. It feels as though the easiest way to make change, which is solely needed here, is if you unfortunately move on from Mitch Marner, who you acknowledge is probably a top 20, 25 player in the NHL. He is, in my opinion. There's not a lot of two-way 100-point wingers out there, and he is one of them. But unfortunately, there's got to be some sort of change. They got to get this. They got to mix it up, and the best way to do that is to just let Mitch walk and find a way to replace him by committee. You're not going to find a one guy. It's got to be by committee, or you can wait till next season, next off season. Where I don't know if you saw Dave, but there's quite a lot of high price free agents who could hit the market next off season. We could talk about that maybe on the other side, give you a couple names I'm referring to, but Tavares had some interesting comments as well at the locker cleanout yesterday. So we'll get into those. What did Berube say? What did Auston Matthews, the captain, have to say a couple days after his team was eliminated? We'll get to all that more next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast.
Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feeling fuller longer. Personally, the no shell options are a big fan. I'm a big fan of those. It's the perfect grab and go snack, not only for busy days where I need to take it on the road, but if I'm here at my desk, I don't want to make a lot of mess. It's an easy snack to have. Or if you do like the cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite, and they come in many different flavors. So get snacking and cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Dave Morassutti and Mike DiStefano with you, as always, here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, which is free and available wherever you get your podcasts every weekday, Monday through Friday. You can also find us up on YouTube all off season. We're not going to be stopping the pod. The Leafs season might be over, but the Locked On Leafs podcast continues all throughout the playoffs, and then free agency, draft season, and then the off season will be here as well. So make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Leafs for your daily dosage of Maple Leafs content. So the Maple Leafs had their locker clean out yesterday. We got to hear from the players and the coach. Did not hear from Brad Treliving. I'm sure we will very soon. Has it been announced when Treliving's going to speak?
No, I haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah,
which is a little bizarre.
Yet. Well, doesn't it make you kind of think that they're holding off until they make the Shanahan discussion? Because typically it's it's the president and GM that speak together. But if Shanny's not going to be here, I think they're waiting to try and make the decision. And you've got, heads the head of the snake now up at the top of MLSE, still waiting to make that decision. Because as of now, we haven't heard anything about Brendan Shanahan. There's been a lot of scrutiny on him. A lot of people starting to put a significant portion of the blame on Shanahan for the failures of this team. And I think that it's curious that we haven't heard anything as of now, as of recording this noon, Wednesday, May 21st. No news on Shanny. I wonder how much that has to do with not having a date or a time for when we hear from the GM also.
Yeah, I had a feeling that even if you just have Brad Treliving kind of discuss, but I do get Brad Treliving would then get so many questions about Shanahan, what's happening moving forward, and this and that. It's either Shanahan
feels like they're getting their ducks in a row. No, it feels like they're getting their ducks in a row, and they're like, okay,
exactly.
Brad, this is what we're doing. Shanny's out. This is what's happening. These are the talking points. This is what we're doing moving forward. And they're just getting ready and preparing Brad for those questions that are going to come to him. That's how I'm reading the situation at this point.
Yeah. And the Leafs kind of have it a little easier in that Shanahan is apparently on an expiring contract.
Yeah.
So this is similar to the Dubas situation where it's okay, we're just not going to renew the contract. And he's and if that's the case, you don't need to hear from Shanahan because he probably would just release a statement or something after that. But I think if you're Keith Pelly, how long do you want this to linger for? I understand he probably thinks we have some time, but it's also you got to get your ducks in a row before with free agency, the draft. You can't. you can probably take a little time, but you can't take a whole lot of time. Like you can't be
It's gotta be by
like
the
what
end of the week.
happened
Gotta be by the
last.
end of the week.
Yeah,
It has to be by the end of the week.
right. The longer it goes on, then the more questions and the more. I think the longer it goes on, so I would say the less likelihood Shanahan comes back too. Like if Shanahan was coming back, if Keith Pelly felt it was the right move for Shanahan to be back, we'd be hearing something a little earlier than right. We would hear something almost more definitively. I don't think Keith Pelly is going to be making that decision.
Yeah,
A week later and be like, yeah, we'll run it back again. Like I think if he was going to make the decision to keep Shanahan, it would have been a little more more urgency just to say let's nip this in the butt. We want him back. The fact it might take some time would suggest that they're probably looking to move on.
I just find it so hard to believe that like he didn't have already he hasn't had those conversations, with the board and with himself and with whoever, is part of that decision-making process. I would be shocked if those conversations didn't happen where it's like, okay, if this team doesn't get it done and it's those guys and the same problems persist, we have to move on from Brendan Shanahan. Like how he possibly could be wrestling with this at this point is kind of baffling to me, especially seeing how that group and those guys performed in games, 5, 6, and 7, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Really, it's kind of stunning. So, yeah, it kind of baffles me that we're at this point where Shanahan is still, possibly going to be returning to this team. I think we should hear something rather soon. And in my opinion, it's the Shanahan plan failed, and it's time for that era to end. Is it time for Tavares's era to end? Didn't really sound like he had 2 feet out the door. Actually, it sounded as though potentially there was some positive talks, Tavares said, when talking to both Berube and Brad Treliving yesterday, and maybe something does get done where Tavares returns to Toronto.
He kind of made it seem like the decision's on the front office now to decide, right? Like he wants to be back. They've had some preliminary talks, but it's up. I think obviously Treliving will have to have that discussion with whoever he has to have that discussion with. I don't know if he has to wait for them to decide who the president's going to be for that discussion too. I think Treliving should be able to handle a Tavares negotiation.
I personally think that, like, if they move on from Shanahan, I don't think they're going to replace him. I think it just becomes a president and GM role for Treliving ultimately. So I think that the decision will lie with him.
And I think like I've been really reading a lot of stuff, hearing a lot of things. Like you can make John Tavares leaving. You have to really decide: does that make this team better, or does it make him worse? You'd be letting a player who scored 38 goals out the door.
Yeah, yes, but I think we also we could have the same conversation that we have with Marner. Does it make them better? Possibly not, but does it make it different? And could it be better because it's different? Possibly.
So my second part of that is, if you are going to let him go, who is going to replace Tavares? Because he's a center. That's one thing you can't. That's always the hardest position to try to find a replacement for is a center. Even if we say he's not a 2C anymore, at worst a 3C, I don't know how much better you're going to get than John Tavares in that role, or even as a winger, if that's where he decides. Like
he had 38 goals this year.
I know. Like he had 20 and 26.
5 goals in the playoffs too.
Like he was productive. He's a guy that when you look at this team and you look at I understand in game 7 he hasn't produced as much, but he's not a guy when we had that conversation on Auston Matthews talking about passengers. John Tavares is not a passenger for me. Like he puts in an effort. Yes, he's not the fastest skater, but I will never question really his effort. Now at times defensively, you wish he could be better in certain scenarios. But the thing about Tavares is you're not getting Tavares at an increased salary. He's not going to come into this saying, I want to be paid the same or more. We're talking about a John Tavares that will take less to stay in Toronto.
What does that number look like for you? Like, what does it have to be? Like, if he comes out here and he's like, "I wanna come back, I'll come back at 7." I'm assuming that's a no, a swift
No,
no.
I
But
I'm
what's
like
that number have to be? Like, if you're Brad Treliving, you're like, "Okay, you wanna come back? This is what the number has to be if you wanna return." Like, we saw this happen a year ago with Steven
yeah.
Stamkos, and the Lightning said, "Here's the number. It's 3 years. We'll give you 7, so you can still make your 20,000,000, but it's gonna be stretched over 7 years. It's gotta have a cap hit at $3,000,000." Right? What do you think that number looks like for the Maple Leafs where they say, "If you wanna come back, here's the number."
Well, I think that's a cautionary tale, the Steven Stamkos one for John Tavares, because Stamkos got 8 million, and what happened? He had probably arguably one of the worst years of his career in a long time.
Yeah.
So I think I would say I'd be fine with 5. You give him 5 million, right?
How
Even
many
if
years? How many years at 5? That's the
well,
question.
I would say 3 years.
Okay.
3 years. I understand that, like how long is he going to play for? That's the other thing too. I think it's a fair offer for him because yes, it is less than what he's making, but he knew that he's getting it. It allows with the cap going up that number doesn't look as bad as the years go along as well. And you keep centers are hard to find, and I rather pay the money to keep a center, a guy who can play center, even if it's at one point he'll be a 3C, or you need a guy to step into play center if they do decide to put him on the wing. Like I think at 5, I would become okay with that.
What's the cap going up to? This is a 92.5. Is that this summer?
So I think it's 90. Was it 95?
Is that what
95 and yeah, I think it's a big jump this year from
Yeah. I remember the escalators. I just don't remember what years it's going to be there. But if it's like, yeah, between 90 and 95, like you're talking about a cap percentage, which a lot of these people talk in percentages now.
yeah.
$5 million deals, like 5.5%, like 5.4%, which is a very stomachable deal, considering it's going to just continue to grow. Like in the next 3 years, it's expected to be up, north of 110 million, right? So at 5 million at $110 million, cap space, cap ceiling, that's less than 5% at that point. So it's doable. It's definitely a digestible contract at that number. It's just whether or not John is willing to make that work, I guess is kind of what we have to wait on. But again, Tavares yesterday in media availability came out and said he felt like there were, positive discussions and felt good about things. He said he wants to return. Berube said he 100% wants John and Mitch to return, which is interesting, I guess. But definitely, it seems like if there's one guy who wants to come back and is more willing to work with the team to make an amicable return, it feels like it would be John Tavares over Mitch Marner. No question about that for me. Okay, we'll take one more quick break. We'll come back and we'll get into kind of the final takeaways from locker cleanout day. What did we think of Berube's comments? The captain, Auston Matthews, spoke as well. So we get to that and more next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as always. It is the day after locker cleanout. We heard from the group, and we already talked about Mitch Marner, his comments, and what we think his future might be. Same with John Tavares, both of which two massive free agents this upcoming offseason. And the Leafs have big time decisions to make on those players. No decision to make on Auston Matthews. Obviously, he's locked up long term. They got that deal done a couple of years ago, so he's here. He's the captain. What did you make of what Auston had to say yesterday?
I wish somebody asked him about the passenger comment, and I am surprised nobody followed up on that.
I'm also surprised that no one did. Yeah, that was quite surprising to me too.
Like that's one there was like, hey, Auston, I know heat of the moment, maybe, you're thinking after a tough loss, but what were you thinking in that moment? Like, do you feel like maybe you would have take a little more ownership yourself in that situation too? Like, to me, there was a missed opportunity there, and like these guys have become so. I thought the Morgan Rowley comment on what Auston Matthews says in the room and what you see, I think that plays a big part of like how John Tavares, how Auston Matthews talks to reporters about certain things. Like, I think he understands when you say something and it gets blown up, as like that comment did, he's not going to say as much when it's an even bigger audience 2 days later. I think I think if people were going to hear him come out and say something absolutely outlandish, I think you have to understand that players have understood how things that are said are taken in this market and how it can be a huge soundbite for 2 days, like it was after that passenger comment.
Yeah. Didn't get into his injury, so he didn't want to get into it, but feels he's not going to do surgery. He feels as though he should be able to heal up over the summer with the long break and should be 100% by training camp. So we'll see. I will be so upset, so mad if we come back in training camp or random, Thursday in August, we hear Auston Matthews has undergone successful back surgery or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it didn't get better over summer. But hey, I'm not gonna mess. I'm no doctor, so I can't sit here.
Did he make a call? I was trying to listen to it live, but there was a lot of issues with the feeds going on. I don't know if you saw that. There was just like it was almost as if they were in the basement of the gulag or something when they're trying to do that presser. But he made it seem as if like it's his, like he'll do what he kind of wants to do. Like he has the right to make the decision. I don't know if it was referring to the injury.
I think it's like Eichel-esque, right?
It is, and I have no problem with that. A player, if he feels that surgery, I don't know. Again, when we don't know what the issue is, like with Jack Eichel, at least we knew what the issue was. With Matthews, he has every right to say, I don't want to discuss what the problem is because players feel like it will then become a target. I don't doubt that for a second. But it's hard to argue against what he wants to do when you don't know what he's actually trying to go through, what he's trying to deal with. Right. So if it is his back, which I kind of assumed, I think we had this discussion before. We kind of felt it was his back. Yeah. Because he said it affects everything. Was it impacting your shot? Well, it was impacting everything. Well, there's only a few injuries where everything gets impacted, including your shooting. Back is usually back or hip are usually the big ones there.
Shot, your skating, your core strength, like all of that is all so that's why the assumption's there. And it's the amount of people, and I hate that I had become like a Matthews apologist all season long, because the amount of people, I'm sure you've been the same boat, that have been upset with Matthews. He's like, the amount of people that have told me in the last week that the team, like the way out isn't to move on from Marner, it's to trade Matthews. Like I've had so many people come up to me and say that to me. It's wild. I'm like, he's your captain. The guy scored 69 goals last year. He's like, he stinks. He can't do anything. Last year was a mirage. It's like the guy was hurt all season. He was not healthy all year long. And I continually said this, like, you keep saying that. It's like, because he's still hurt. He's still unhealthy. He's been talking about it all season, how he's going to have to just play through it and play through it and play through it. And, 70% of Matthews is still better than like 80% of the league. Like we saw that clearly. Maybe even better than 90% of the league, realistically. But when he's at 100%, he's one of the best damn players in the world. And hopefully they can get him back to that next year, because the Leafs are going to need it, especially if his best friend or his Robin to his Batman isn't there, and Mitch Marner. He's going to have to pick up some of the slack there when it comes to providing some offense. Any other takeaways from what you heard at Locker Cleanout Day?
Well, I loved what Matthew Knies had to say.
Okay, which part? That he wants to be here?
Well, I assumed he wants to be here. Two things he said. No offer sheet. He wouldn't even entertain that, which I'm sure his agent's like, shh, don't be saying that. But the one about John Tavares really stuck with me. Him saying it would be hard for him to not see John Tavares in a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, not to see him in the room.
Well, he lived with Tavares
Yep.
all of last year, right? I don't know when
I
he
think the
moved.
first couple of years that like when he first kind of joined the
Yeah.
team and like after like his first year
Yeah.
in Toronto.
So they're very close.
Like I don't think people understand how important it is to have a player like John Tavares who's willing to do that. Because I don't know how many players are willing to allow a teammate to live in their house. I understand John Tavares
With
probably
a
got a
young
nice house.
family at that, right? Like
Yeah.
with a young family.
Like that's something that teams really do value, to have a veteran that's willing to do something like that. Right. And so again, when we're looking at reasons why you would consider bringing John Tavares back, it's those sort of things that I think also play into just how his importance with the team off the ice. Yes, he's not the most charismatic person, but if he didn't just do this with Matthew Knies, he also did it with Fraser Minton when he was here.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
he understands the importance. I guarantee if Tavares is around and Easton Cowan is looking for a place, right? Like I think it'd be the same boat, and I think now more than ever, like we've truly understood just how important it is to have Matthew Knies be a part of that core. So when we're talking about the reasons why Tavares will take less is so that Matthew Knies can make more. I just think that you know, he gets it. Matthew Knies, I think, gets it a lot more than like other players who will want to make more money, but also understand that there's a team dynamic that's involved. I think he gets it.
yeah, yep. No, I think that's it's a good point. Very good point. In Knies we trust. In Knies we trust. He's quickly becoming, a favorite Maple Leaf for a lot of people, and that would be another reason as to why. Why don't we wrap things here? I know we want to get into Berube, but I think there's a little bit more meat on the bone. It's something that we could probably get into tomorrow. So we went with the players today. We'll break down what Berube had to say on tomorrow's show because there was a lot. There was a lot, I think, from Craig Berube, both positive and negative, and what the team can learn from these mistakes, which learned lessons. We're still learning lessons 9 years into this thing. It's quite impressive that they can still possibly come out and say those phrases, but they did multiple times. But yeah, so we'll get into Berube's comments and what he had to say and his outlook on the future of this Maple Leafs team with such an interesting offseason ahead. So that'll be on tomorrow's podcast, but that'll do it for us here today. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You could subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow the birthday boy at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs, both on Twitter and on Instagram. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.